China's State Chancellor Wang Yi has warned that development projects in Africa must be sustainable, denouncing outside forces who accuse China of creating debt traps, saying in September government debt from Chinese interest-free loans due by the end of the year would be written off for the poorest African nations. Chinese President Xi Jinping pledged $60 billion to African nations at a China-Africa summit on cooperation in September, matching the size of funds offered at the previous summit in Johannesburg. Amadou Kante gives us more on that.
China's top diplomat has denounced outside forces who seek to vilify cooperation by accusing China of creating debt traps in Africa. Chinese State Councillor Wang Yi told foreign and other ministers from 50-some African countries at a forum in Beijing his country does not pursue self-geopolitical gains in Africa and would never impose its will on others. He said China's approach to cooperation with Africa had been different to that of traditional powers.
For some time, some outside forces have tried to vilify and undermine China-Africa cooperation by cooking up accusations of so-called neo-colonialism and debt traps and so on, which are totally groundless and are not accepted by African people. Such attempts expose a total lack of respect for Africa, lack of understanding about China, and absence of knowledge about the true friendship between China and Africa that has stood the test of time. Facts speak louder than words. Regarding China-Africa's work relationship, it is only Chinese and African people who have the most authority to speak about this.
Speaking at the forum, Ugandan President His Excellency Yoweri Kaguta Museveni pointed out that Africa and China should establish an equitable trade and developmental model that should emancipate humanity from the primitive tendencies of win-lose situation. We should all work for win-win frameworks. Let China and Africa move forward.
Africa and China should therefore establish an equitable trade and development model that should emancipate humanity from the primitive tendencies of win-lose situations. We should all work for win-win frameworks. China, by supporting infrastructure, which is the base of the production of tradable goods and services, is already moving in the right direction.
Chinese President Xi Jinping pledged $60 billion to African nations at a China-Africa summit on cooperation in September, matching the size of funds offered at the previous summit in Johannesburg in 2015. Considering that, here are $10 million projects in Africa which are standing today, and others are in the pipeline thanks to Chinese money. Chinese intervention in the Gambia includes at an international conference earmarked for the next OIC summit and the Red Network and Bridge in the Upper River region. The new wrestling arena in Senegal was built by China. At least 5 African countries have had their railway system funded by China, namely Kenya, Ethiopia, Angola, Djibouti, and Nigeria. The current African Union's headquarters in Addis Ababa was also fully funded and built by China, including the West African Regional Bloc ECOWAS agreement with China to build their headquarters at Abuja at a cost of $31.6 million, just to name a few.
China pledges another $60 billion for African countries.